This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News, and today I'm with Jan Harwood, who recently announced his resignation from the Conservative Group at Guildford Borough Council. Hello, Jan. Thank you for this interview with the Guildford Dragon.
Pleasure to be here.
And let's get straight into the meat of it then. So why have you decided to leave the Conservative Group only 6 months after joining it?
Just a little bit over 6 months, I think. But firstly, just a clarification, I resigned from the Conservative Party, which automatically means I lose the whip at GBC. You can't sit as a Conservative councillor if you're not a member of the Conservative Party. It makes sense, really. So that the reason is mainly because I was just wrong. I was under the impression when I joined back in, I think it was mid-November, I joined the Conservatives. I was under the impression that we were on the cusp of a change within the Conservative Party, that Boris would be departing imminently, and that there would be a rebuilding of the Conservative direction of the both at the parliamentary level, but also at a broader level. And I was rather hoping for a return to sort of base Conservative principles. And in all honesty, I was excited that I could perhaps be a part of that, a part of a change for the better, I was hoping, and that I was coming into the Conservative Party at its lowest point, and that there would be a period of self-reflection and an admission of how things had panned out and how it hadn't gone particularly well, and that they would grow from that. Because as we've seen over the last sort of 100 years, the reason the Conservatives have been in power for 70 odd of those out of those last 100 is because they're adaptable and they're brutal in their pragmatism. You know, we saw it with Thatcher, we saw it with many points through history. And I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be a part of that change. And it turns out I was incredibly wrong. It got much, much worse.
Okay, so what you said there was that you first of all resigned from the Conservative Party, and that necessitated your departure from the Conservative Group at GBC.
Correct.
But did you want to stay in the group, and would you have wanted to stay in the group if that had been possible?
That's a difficult question. I would have struggled to call myself a Conservative.
So you couldn't really stay in that group, could you? Once you're, I mean,
really.
I know obviously by the rules you can't stay in that group, but you know, morally it would be a bit of a difficult position, exactly, to say the least.
So
okay.
I don't have a problem with those two things being linked. So no, I don't think I could stay on. And I had this conversation with the group leader, and we did discuss it. If there was a way for me to disassociate myself from the bigger picture stuff and carry on with the work, but it's simply not possible. It's not. I wouldn't be honest to myself or to the outside world. Okay.
Now your decision also coincided with the ending of your contract as a researcher for Guildford's MP, Angela Richardson. Did that have any bearing on the decision?
Yes, insofar as that I think I pretty much made up my mind with the first vote of confidence in Boris Johnson. I thought that really signaled that the direction I wanted to be a part of for the growth of the Conservative Party wasn't what the rest of the Conservative Party wanted, by definition of that confidence vote. And at that moment I made that decision. However, I was supportive of our MP's outspoken criticism, and I didn't want to put her in a difficult position. I made a commitment to support her and to work for her and to carry out the important work she does, and I didn't want to simply give that up. As you might have noticed, I'm inclined to carry out my duties wherever possible if I've committed myself to do so. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't put her in a difficult position.
Okay, now we've been told, not by Angela Richardson, I want to stress, that she was not very happy with your work. Is that true?
It's entirely possible, yes. I found it very, very difficult.
Sorry, it's entirely what, sorry?
Possible. I haven't been told that directly, but that would not surprise me massively. I really struggled with towing party lines on a number of subject matters. I immensely struggled with that.
Okay, and she expected you to toe the party line, even though she shared your...
That's what the job is. I mean, yeah. Angela and I have a huge amount of respect for her. She works incredibly hard, as do her team, and they do a fantastic job, I think. all things considered, with the volume of material that they'd have to deal with. But I very much struggled with the nature of the job, which is being a Conservative party member and having to support the government in its various schemes. And when people write to us, the parliamentary team, and have to explain their fears, their frustrations, and you have to write back and explain to them the government position, there's a certain level of complicity in that, I thought, and I really struggle with that. So it's entirely possible. If that's a public statement, then I wouldn't discount it.
It's something that's been said to us, so I just wanted to get your view on that.
Yeah,
so
I did my best.
Okay, and how would you characterize your relationships with other members of the Conservative group? Because again, as these things go, we get told one thing. We were told that observations by other councillors were that there were some strained relationships or with other members of your group. Is that true?
I think a little bit of self-reflection here. Perhaps that if that is true, I certainly didn't necessarily feel it directly, but that's not a new piece of information on the basis that the exact same thing was true when I was a Liberal Democrat.
Yeah,
a number of councils. So perhaps I'm an abrasive person, and perhaps I should self-reflect on that and seek to fix that. But the fundamental issue is I don't necessarily agree politically with some of the people in the group, though I had cordial relationships. I mean, I really enjoyed working with the majority of the Conservative councillors on the council, and I thought they are valuable councillors. So I certainly wouldn't single out anyone as I had a problem with.
No. So were the differences more personality, or were they more philosophical, or on policy issues?
Philosophy and policy. But as we all know, I'm not really a true blue Conservative, and I never have been. My decision was fueled by a pragmatic desire for change. So it's not surprising that I would clash philosophically / politically with some of the more extremes is the wrong word, but the more established core Conservative values. That's not surprising, I don't think.
Okay, I think what will surprise people is that you didn't realise that in the first place. I mean,
I was very honest about it.
I had conversations with people, and we were both saying, we can't see this lasting. He won't be a fit there. But none. So, do you now regret? I mean, you've already said that you made a mistake. If you had your time over.
No, I don't think I made a mistake. I think, given the information I had at the time, I'd probably still make the same decision. The fact that it's turned out to be wrong is, I mean, look, I had to do something, Martin. I had to fight for the change I wanted to see. I very strongly believe that political parties reflect the people that they comprise, not the other way around. I don't think you assume the conservatism onto yourself when you join. The Conservative Party is comprised of people, and it's quite a broad church, as they would like to tell you themselves. And I think that ebbs and flows in where the emphasis is. We had a fairly one nation party on the Cameron. I saw myself as being perfectly at home with, say, a blast from the past, who's no longer a Conservative, but a Rory Stewart-esque, one nation, highly competent sort of conservatism is not incompatible with my.
But he resigned before you joined.
Yeah, but there was a rumor at the time,
wasn't it?
Well, there was a rumor at the time that he might be returning, and that did get me a little excited, I will admit. But look, this is fundamentally why I've now left. Is that at the time I thought that we were moving in a different direction, and I thought that we would see I genuinely believed we would see a sort of a new Labour-esque 21st century revival of the conservatism in a much more updated fashion, and that simply hasn't happened.
So how are you? I mean, no, first of all, isn't it perhaps a weakness of our system that you have to align yourself with a political party to be involved in mainstream politics?
Yes, and people like me are always going to struggle with that. And I think I suspect that I've burnt all the bridges available to me. So that's just a part of our political system right now, and that's very frustrating. I have no loyalty to any party, and that's become abundantly clear. And as we're seeing today, in the news, loyalty is perhaps valued above all else. And so if that's the currency of politics, then I'm afraid I'm very, very poor.
Okay. Well, so you're not politically aligned now. So
Yeah.
how are you going to position yourself at GBC? Are you just simply going to take each issue as it comes and vote according to your conscience and your knowledge? Is that how it's going to be?
I've always done that, regardless of my affiliation anyway. And in an ideal world, I think that's how I would expect all our elected representatives to behave, to be judged on their votes on decision making, not on the badge color they wear. The reality, of course, is that it's a bit more complicated than that. And from a pragmatic perspective, administrations need to maintain some semblance of unity in order to actually drive change. So, but I've never felt particularly chained by that at GBC. The level of decision making at GBC is an order of magnitude different to any, at higher tiers at county or so. A lot of the decisions that we make at GBC aren't particularly politicized. In all honesty, they're not big strategy defining, society shifting changes. So I don't see a problem in that. Realistically, I will simply be a critical friend.
A critical friend to who?
To the council, to the administration. I don't have a problem. Yeah, to all parties. I mean, I will likely continue to work with anyone who's willing to work with me, and I will gladly dedicate time and effort to help in any way that people seek of me, if they so wish to. But I suspect they won't.
Okay. Now, as you will have already gathered, I've talked around with different people before this interview. One thing that came to light that I hadn't anticipated was there has been some criticism from political opponents, of course, but that you have not been paying enough attention to casework within your ward. Is that a fair comment? My
job for Angela was literally casework, so I don't know if that's a fair comment.
Well, I think they mean your council casework.
Just in my personal capacity, I think they'd be surprised with the number of phone calls I take on any given week dealing with small things. What they mean is I don't publicize, I don't write leaflets, or I don't write Facebook posts about how great I am at what I've fixed. So my visibility is low, but my public number is available, and I get on average at least 2 or 3 people calling me about various matters a week. Okay, and you're not aware of any complaints from your constituents that you haven't been doing casework properly? I'm not aware of any complaints, but I get a fair number of complaints about my shifting political alliances, calls to do X, Y, and Z. But that's not surprising. I think that's par for course. Okay. Now, I think you've already answered this question, but your resignation, I think you've acknowledged, means an end to any political ambitions you might have had. This is a great topic. People have been speculating about my political ambitions since the day I think I joined. I don't know if many people know, but I became a councillor largely by accident. I was convinced by the Liberal Democrats to run as a paper candidate and told that I had no chance. And fast forward to that election, I'm suddenly in an executive, having to put aside my career and various other things to serve Guildford. And I think there was a certain assumption that I had some great aspirations. Which I suspect was part of the tensions in the previous Liberal Democrats. They thought I was trying to take over. A short conversation with Caroline would dissuade you of that very quickly, I promise you. Caroline Reeves we're talking about. Yes, yeah, of course, who's my mentor. I mean, it's the person I still look up to and seek guidance from to this day. So have you spoken to her about this? Oh, yes. She was one of the first people I told, And what did she say? Told you so? No, she it's a private conversation. Yeah, no, okay. that was not a reaction, but I have always been and will hope to be always on good terms. Right. Okay. So my ambitions are, yeah. But it's not surprising, is it, that a young man, there's nothing wrong with being ambitious. You go into the field of politics, and you are quite forceful and dynamic. It's not surprising that people draw the conclusions that you're ambitious in the political sphere. So it's hardly surprising that people did think that, is it? No, I don't think it's surprising. I think. But you're saying it's not true. It's not true. I did consider it, and part of the decision to join the Conservatives was, I think, I perhaps saw an opportunity for more growth in that direction. That's undeniably one of the reasons. That made it easier to make that shift. But ultimately, I don't think I'm very good at this from a pure politics. I think, as I say, I lack the main currency, which is this ability, this willingness to toe the line or or to be loyal to an institution as opposed to the people. My motivation is other people I serve, and Guildford in this instance.
Okay. Is that the only limit? Is that the only limitation that's caused the problem, or is it also the way you get on with other people?
Undeniably, that I have had friction with a number of other councillors, but I think I'd like to think that the people who have worked with me directly would testify to my ability to work in a team. What I lack is patience, political patience, undeniably, and something I've been working on in my personal life as well as in my political life. I don't tolerate incompetence or people who behave in bad faith. And I really struggle with that. And I make it very vocal about that. And sometimes in politics, you have to bite your tongue and keep your mouth shut. And I'm not very good at that.
But you have worked in the Guildford Borough Council, haven't you, with people that haven't lived up to those standards?
Absolutely.
But I noticed that you're very reticent. Well, so far in this interview, you've been reticent to point the finger at others about their behaviour or standards or even their policies. Why is that?
Because I am reticent to push myself forward into once again to the limelight. I'm rather looking forward to a quiet end of my term, so I can finish my duty to serve the people of Guildford and then quietly disappear into obscurity. That was
so you do have criticisms, but you don't want to share them?
Because it will do no good.
Will it do no good? Isn't actually the oxygen of publicity, as they say, good for government? You know, isn't there too little openness in our government?
Perhaps, but
I mean, if things had been exposed with Boris Johnson a bit earlier, maybe he wouldn't have been elected as leader.
I think for anyone who was watching, they were exposed pretty early on, and I've been vocal on a number of issues previously. I don't have anything new to reveal here. My previous criticisms all still apply. But there's a reason why I haven't gone crawling back to the Liberal Democrats with my head bowed low. There's a reason why I haven't looked to join the Independents. I note that some of that, yeah. So I am critical, but that's not to mean that I'm critical for the sake of being critical.
I find it hard to believe you haven't got other things that could be revealed, having worked inside two political groups at Guildford Borough.
What do you want to know, Martin? Ask me a specific question and I'll tell you the answer.
Well, I mean, how do you think that the leadership of the Conservative Group is very good?
That's a very poignant question. I think, and Paul will have to forgive me for saying this, I get on extremely well with Paul. I think Paul made a critical error in the past, and I think he's going to struggle to ever recover from that, which is that he made a local plan, which is sound, but didn't communicate to the journey of how he got to that point to the people of Guildford sufficiently. And so his reputation in that regard has been forever tainted, and he will never escape that shadow he has cast onto himself, effectively. He is an effective leader. He is, but he by the circumstances of previous decisions, he is in a position where I think it's very difficult to recover from. Of no real personal or character fault of his own, just simply by the virtue it is. And that's ultimately, I think, one of the biggest elements of the Conservatives. Let me rephrase. The biggest problem with the Conservatives in the Guildford Borough Council is they are the boogeyman. They're being painted as the pantomime villain. Everything bad that's ever happening now in the present administration is somehow a previous Conservative's fault, and everything good is a direct change that's come about since the election, when that's simply not true.
No, but I mean, there's been a lot of criticism of R4GB over their failure to have the plan reviewed.
Well, but I told them this on day one, and this, you know, this was a. This is the reason I arrived at the conclusions I arrived at when I took on the portfolio from day one. I mean, I spent a year catching up with planning. And by the way, just for reference, I intend to go on and do planning related things. I've just accepted to do a master's at Reading University in spatial planning and development. So I immersed myself in the planning world, and I reached a conclusion that the local plan was sound, and it was the best available option out of a set of other options. Well, actually, best is a strong word. It was a workable solution out of the options available to the previous administration, and that there was very little anyone could do at that stage to make it, quote unquote, better. in the way that R4GV claimed they could. So they made a bunch of claims which, unfortunately for them, were never going to be substantiated when they took power, and now they're having to deal with the consequences of that.
Okay, and what about the Lib Dem group? Because you did criticize them when you left them and said they were disorganized, if my memory is correct. So what can you add to that? I mean, is it still the same?
Well, I don't know. I'm not a Lib Dem anymore, but my issue with the Lib Dems is they don't know what they want. And they haven't done anything as a consequence of that. I mean, if let me ask you a question. Can you name me one Lib Dem initiative at this council over the last 3 years?
Well, I'm not the one being interviewed here.
No, I know,
but I haven't prepared for that. But you know, if you're saying that
you pay attention, no, I can't.
Okay.
Now, some of my people say the 3,000 homes, which was always going to be. I mean, you know, I rue the day that I happen to know who wrote that policy, but there's no need to get into that. You know, that was a policy written by someone who didn't think they were ever going to have to be forming an executive out of at the end of an election. So, short of that policy, I can't name you a single strong, you know, headline policy or objective that the Liberal Democrats are aiming for in Guildford, and that's kind of tragic. And I tried to address that at the time.
Okay,
R4GV have the town centre master plan. The Conservatives have the local plan that they push through. The Lib Dems don't really have anything.
And what about the R4GV style of leadership and their election prospects, given their failure to have the plan reviewed? Whatever you think about that decision, you know, some people obviously don't like it.
Well, I think people are rightly frustrated that if you claim to do if you claim that you're running on a platform of delivering a sweeping set of changes to a policy that nobody likes, and then when the time comes that you actually have the power to do that, and you find out behind the scenes that actually if you do make the changes, they'll make it worse, not better, and then therefore for good reasons you don't trigger that review, then people are going to be rightly angry. It's a bit, you know, it's a classic, like as a former Lib Dem, it's 2009 and the student fees. Maybe there were some really good reasons why that couldn't happen from I don't think there were, but let's say there were, and then you have to make that decision. No one will ever forget that. So I think I think R4GV will have some tough questions to answer at the next election. I think the leadership style and how they managed it has been very tricky. We saw at the last vote that, you know, members of the executive.
When you say tricky, you mean it's been tricky for them? You don't mean?
Yeah, I think it's tricky for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, you know, when members of the executive are voting against DMP policy adoptions, you've got to really ask yourself, how are they holding it together? I think Councillor Bigmore does a good job of holding his team together, but fundamentally it's a group of people brought together as independents, and they all have different views, and that's why they're independent, and that's why a lot of them broke away from the Conservatives or from the Liberal Democrats. So it's a hard team to hold together.
Right. So that leads me to another question then. Is the problem that someone like you can't fit in with our politics a problem of the way we structure our politics?
Well, I think first I have to be a bit self-critical and answer, does our politics really need people like me? I'm not sure it necessarily does. But let me just take what you've said as a compliment more than anything else. I think so, yes. I think the fact that I can't find a home where I feel I can belong is an issue. I had really hoped that the Liberal Democrats would be that home for me, but I just didn't see any growth in terms of trying to move things forward. I don't want to be a protest vote. I don't want to be an accident or something to just to endlessly complain from the sidelines without ever having part in policy, which is what obviously prompted me to join the Conservatives to try and change. And a part of me has hope that actually the fact that, you know, our MP Angela was so welcoming and others that were so welcoming gives me hope that mainstream parties are capable of change. They are capable of growing and adapting to changing world circumstances. And the fact that they're willing to take on a slightly fanatical environmentalist like me gives me hope.
So you don't think that the party political system has come to the end of its shelf life?
That's a loaded question. You know, I think it has. But look, I'll tell you what. I'll answer it in a typical politician fashion. I'll answer a slightly different question that you didn't ask. I thought it was really interesting that a lot of the resignations sign off with and I'm forever loyal to the Conservative Party, or I am still a staunch Conservative, or what, you know, something to that effect. And all I can think of is my only loyalty, true loyalty, is to the people, to the people that vote, whether they voted for me or not, by the way. And as a secondary, but almost of equal worth to the unborn generations yet to come. That's where my loyalty is. The fact that you would sign off anything with, as ever, my loyalty is to institution XYZ, to me is alien. And perhaps it's the problem and perhaps it's not, but it won't stop me fighting. This might be the end for me for now, and I'll go and do some other things, but I hope to come back one day when politics is a bit more in my flavor.
Well, you've learned enough from politics to answer the question you posed yourself rather than the one I posed. But
yeah, I'm still at least partially a politician.
But all right, I still don't really know though whether you feel that party politics is due for a complete overhaul or a replacement with some other system.
I think Winston Churchill's words ring to mind, that democracy.
No, but he said democracy. He didn't say party politics.
That's true. Well, but in a similar vein, I'm not sure if I have a different system. Look, I think it's that there is space in British politics for a 21st century party, one that's unhindered and sheds its baggage of its past and reforms as sort of a new Labour moment for any of the parties to do. Now, at the time, I actually have a written proposal. I can drag it up if you really want to have a look at it. It's a bit old now, but a dramatic idea to, for example, merge the Green Party with the Liberal Democrats, rebrand, and say we're a 21st century party. This is how we operate. Technically competent, brought into the future age with the the internet age, with its campaigning. No more paper, for example, and all this kind of really innovative stuff. I think there's space for it, and I think my generation and the generations before me and after me are interested in such a thing. Will it happen? Not until the system properly breaks, I suspect, and I'm hoping that Boris is that breakage. I think that nobody in their right mind looks at this and goes, "Yeah, let's just do something similar to this." I mean, it's madness.
Well, that's an interesting aspiration, but we'll see how it goes. I think the establishment is quite strong and likes the status quo. Okay, now lastly, because we've been going on for a while now, do you intend to stand again as a borough councillor next May?
No.
Okay, so
I've served my time.
Okay, well, Jan Harwood, whatever happens next, good luck to you, and thank you very much for taking part in this interview.
Always a pleasure. Thanks.